New Zealand's Bill of Rights. What's the point? Having been exposed to some of the most vitriolic defenders of the faith and institutions in my day-to-day life, and my IQ suffering for it, I've come to the unsettling conclusion that a large portion of people either don't know we have a Bill of Rights, or don't care enough to uphold it. All it took was a questionable public health act and a critical mass of scared and cowardly people who would not dare question the one source of truth.
We will continue to be your single source of truth.
For my rights and yours to be stripped away. To be sure, this issue extends far past these little islands on the bottom of the world. Many countries seem to have the exact same problem as us. It seems to stem from a suspiciously identical outlook on the issue of public health from the government, policymakers, and various unelected consultants. At the root of it, there seems to be two major issues. Firstly, a government who is very willing to rescind basic human rights in the name of public safety. And secondly, a seemingly large portion of the population who will not only let them, but demand it. Oh, they demanded it alright, and who could blame them? The media spent months priming the most trusting of us to be receptive to the kind and caring authoritarian measures that would be enacted to keep us safe, reporting thousands of new cases of this scary new virus, reporting every new infection, tracking its movement around the world like it's the Grim Reaper going door to door, reporting thousands of deaths, morgues overrun, doctors pleading with people to make it stop in the media. Who wasn't at least a little concerned at the outset? Those labelled conspiracy theorists, that's who. Perhaps you believe the hype, and perhaps like me at some point you started to see the cracks in the story. Questionable testing techniques, fucky death reporting, or the distinct lack of dead people lining the sidewalks. These were but a few things that caught my attention, though you had to be paying attention. And who could miss the large majority of people who caught the world's deadliest disease, reporting that it was no worse than the sniffles? With 2020 hindsight, can we agree that the government's response was a little, shall we say, heavy-handed? I'm supposed to have certain intrinsic, inalienable rights. The right to free movement, the right to protest, the right to refuse medical treatment without punishment or coercion, I might add, the right to religion, the right to free thought, and a right to expression, and more. Most countries have similar provisions, a list of basic human rights. Any decent, free and democratic country anyway. Who would have thought that the government could come along and rescind these rights with something as flimsy as a public health act? I vehemently oppose the notion that the government should be able to do what it pleases because, quote, we know best. That is totally in opposition to everything I stand for. Not only as a free and autonomous individual, but as a bloody adult who doesn't need to be coddled by someone who's barely qualified to look after themselves, let alone an entire country. I don't care if you think that they really do know what's best. I don't even care if they actually do know what's best. If we let them do that, we are on a slippery path straight to socialist hell. Hyperbolic perhaps, but many a socialist regime has been enacted on the basis that we know best. Don't worry, don't pay attention, we have everything under control. Taking all the money away will make your life better, we promise. Let us distribute the food, it'll make your life better, we promise. We won't fuck it up. Hey, don't ask questions, but we have to get rid of all these pesky sparrows. The same but for the Jews. And who could forget everyone's favourite? Let me worry about printing the money, you just worry about where you're going to spend all your millions, champ. Chump. You'd have to be to believe the lie. People should be very, very disturbed that they could lock us in our homes so easily. Remove our freedom to move about as we please. Remove our ability to make proper choices about medical procedures. Or outright coerce us into taking something that we may not want to take. Grant our employers the ability to fire us for not taking a certain vaccine. Worse than being beholden to the government's foolish mandates is being beholden to a human resource manager. I can hardly imagine a more satanic force in the world. I suppose in many ways the clown in charge of our country is a lot like a human resource manager. I definitely get HR vibes anyway. Something about the use of power for the sake of it, not really serving a purpose aside from making sure everybody knows who's in charge, and making sure everyone's feelings are protected. People should be concerned when you are required to have had a certain medical procedure in order to worship at church on a Sunday. Free to practice religion, so long as you give up your rights to refuse medical treatments. And heaven forbid if you ask critical questions.
This is an issue of. This is an issue. Sir, I'm going to answer the questions of the accredited media.
So much for free expression. Countless millions were spent on making sure we didn't believe the conspiracy theorists. They forced upon us ad campaigns, government-funded news articles, and non-stop scolding of those who dared point out the obvious, that it was all largely in vain. Furthermore, at least now we all know that while we do have the right to protest, the government will ignore it, pretend it's not a big deal, and not talk to protesters for fear of lowering the public's confidence in certain authoritarian public health measures. Not only that, the government-funded, accredited media will run a smear campaign in order to turn the people against those simply exercising their rights. Finally, they'll turn the police on them, beating them senseless and arresting them. But you still have the right to protest. I can't help but notice that when people protest against things the government supports, things go a lot more smoothly. They made sure no one listened to the conspiracy theorists who said the death numbers were over-exaggerated. They made sure we ignored people who said they'd mandate the vaccine. They didn't want us to pay attention to those who said the vaccine didn't stop transmission, or even could be harmful. You couldn't point out that the vaccine had little to no impact on transmission in places like Israel, Germany, Portugal, Gibraltar, and parts of America. I suppose if we did pay attention to the crazies who believed all this nonsense, we'd all see that they took our freedoms away for nothing. We all still got COVID. They tried to blame the unvaccinated, but there is no denying that you could still catch it, spread it, and die from it regardless of your vax status. Unvaxxed, double vaxxed, boosted, double boosted, or my favourite, double vaxxed, double masked, triple boosted, alone in a car. A tiny, tiny car barely big enough to fit those big fucking shoes in, the fucking clowns. I know, I can hear it now. It was all worth it, even if we only saved one life. Fuck that. What a joke. I'm sick to death of this altruism through authoritarianism. It does not work like that. How many lives were ruined just so we allegedly saved a life? At what point do we draw the line? If we really wanted to save a life, they'd stop the fat fucks who actually died of COVID from stuffing unchewed blocks of cheese down their gullets. Anything to save a life. The uncomfortable fact of the matter is that they'd never do that because it would be bad for big cheese. It's undeniable. Some people got much, much richer through this pandemic, and most people got much, much poorer as a direct result of the government's enforced kindness measures. Anything to save a life? Not so much. Anything to make the rich richer and disenfranchise the masses with pointless mandates backed by new laws that are neither free nor democratic, that put power in the hands of incompetent dickheads in charge who will then get to make vital decisions about how you live your life, spend your money and raise your children? I think so. I know I'm screaming into the void on this one, and I know that if I espouse these ideas with my friends or colleagues, I get treated like someone with mental leprosy by at least 80% of them. But it bears saying nonetheless. Obviously, not all is lost, and I expect we'll get some or most of our rights back at some point in the not too distant future. But this does set a rather sickening precedent. What happens when there's an unseasonable heatwave? Will they enact a public safety act for global warming? Anything to save a life, after all. Or will it be the next pandemic? I have absolutely no doubt that some people are planning with glee all the cruel and unusual ways that they can keep us safe next time. So what's the point of the Bill of Rights? Well, it makes people feel like they have rights. It really instills the confidence in the people of New Zealand that if they live in this country, they can feel safe knowing that they have rights, right up to the point where having rights would pose a risk to the feelings of safety of the people in this country. To be honest, I don't know what the point of having intrinsic inalienable rights is if the government can just alienate them with a stroke of a pen. But what I do know is if we don't stand up for our rights, if we don't speak up when they're taken away regardless of the reasons, then we might as well not have them at all. If we don't demand that our basic human rights be upheld, then bureaucrats who know what's best for us will turn the great nations of this world into third world shitholes faster than you believe. Thank you for listening to my unhinged and dangerous conspiracy theories. Don't like or subscribe, or you'll end up on a list. And anything you write in the comments section can and will be held against you in a court of law.